Hey everybody, welcome to the official Do Good Better podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Kirby, and of course we talk to small nonprofits doing very great big things. And sometimes those very small nonprofits doing great big things need a great big brain to help them out, and especially leading into the fourth quarter. So I have reached out to one of the smartest human beings I know, one of the most personable human beings I know. I am giving her very many kudos, and if you're not watching this on YouTube, she's again, one of the more delightful humans you will ever meet, visually or in your ears.
Oh, stop. I mean, do go on, Patrick. I mean, I'll send you a check later.
Fair enough. Rhea Wong, Rheawongconsulting. She's the founder, and she is going to talk to us today about all things fundraising, philanthropy, and maybe even kind of prospecting and gift management and all that good stuff. But first, if you're scrolling through Apple and you're scrolling through your favorite place you're listening to this podcast and you're wondering, I need to know more about her, but I have no idea who she is. Rhea, why don't you give like a 5,000-foot view on who you are, what you do, background, and all those good things so the lovely listening audience can kind of be as infatuated with your brain as I am before we get started today.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Patrick. That was a very generous introduction. I mean, my brain, I do pride myself on having a good brain. My mother reminds me it's a very expensive brain.
Very.
So, yeah. And unfortunately, there's no off switch. It usually starts working at around 4 a.m. when I'm trying to sleep, and it starts talking. It's very chatty. It's a chatty brain.
Why I enjoy your company very much.
Like, stop it, brain. I got to go to sleep. So, yeah, I am a recovering executive director. I was an ED here in New York City for almost 13 years, lucky number 13. And a couple of years ago, I started my own consulting firm, and I focused specifically on the fundraising needs of smaller nonprofits. So at about $1 million and under, because I think that is like the hardest money to raise. Nobody wants to give you a significant gift under $1 million. And so you're just collecting 5,000 here, 500 here, 1,000 here. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. So I thought my mission in life was really to help get resources to these smaller nonprofits that are doing really important work in the community. Often the only ones doing work with folks that are really falling through the cracks of where government and corporate is not meeting their needs. And so that's what I do. And I also have a podcast like yours, which is actually how we met. So yes. Nonprofit Lowdown is where I talk to cool and interesting people once a week.
Mm-hmm. I know, which is where we sort of found each other, and then I've been following you ever since. And you have a wonderful perspective on diversity, inclusion, and sort of perspectives in realms of nonprofits that we might not dabble into in flyover country, North Dakota. But like you said, the groups of individual nonprofits who raise less than $1 million are doing the best work, and they're the most hungry to do more. And the only thing keeping them back is money. And so that's kind of where our brains have sort of melded together. And I'm super excited to kind of get your perspective on a couple of things that I know that folks who are listening to this are going to really find fascinating and really attainable and doable right after this podcast. You're going to go out and do this stuff. But before we get into that, and I always like to ask a lot of my consulting friends or my friends who are doing work with nonprofits all over, is kind of your perspective on the state of fundraising now. We had COVID, everything went to hell in a handbasket. It's sort of here still, and it's still a big deal. What are you seeing from your clients, or what are you seeing from the nonprofits you're working with on what the state of fundraising is?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because I think that there is, I'm seeing sort of two different things. I think there's a lot of fear, right? Obviously, we're looking at possibly a huge recession. But I have to say, in the short term, a lot of nonprofits I'm seeing, especially the smaller ones, have had their best year ever. And I think in part, it's probably buoyed up by PPP money. And I think folks were feeling very generous in the lead up to coronavirus and racial equity movements, and realizing that they really needed to do some stuff. And frankly, a lot of the folks who were giving were not seeing their portfolios decline significantly, despite a lot of jobs reports. And so, yeah, ironically, I think a lot of small nonprofits actually saw a bit of a windfall. I think where we're going to see some problems is next quarter and early 2021 when that money dries up and people sort of move on to the next thing. And so where do we go from there? How do we protect against what we know will be sort of future turbulence?
Did you see a lot of basic need organizations see a real big spike up? Because that's kind of what we saw too, is like those who are food and clothing and shelter, and the ones like the basic needs, really great. And everybody kind of got caught again, like in the windfall. Less now. There was sort of a significant drop. Like, okay, we may have solved that problem, or the emergency ended, and now it's kind of pacing back. And are you seeing that nonprofits who might not have been in the field doing their cultivating, did they see sort of a slowdown? And are they are their eyes getting a little bigger with the fourth quarter coming up? Because I know that's a significant time for most organizations, is that October, November, December.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, I think that there was a lot of money directed to basic needs in the short term, which makes a lot of sense. But I also saw a lot of donors and foundations doubling down on their current grantees. So I think it was a terrible time to start a nonprofit because no one was looking to add to their portfolio. But I think that if you had a really good relationship with your program officer, ding, 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 make sure that you stay in touch. They were actually doing things like giving more unrestricted money, redirecting current program funds to general operating, simplifying their reporting requirements. So I don't know exactly what the question is. Like, do we think that last quarter is going to be a bloodbath? Possibly. But again, I mean, part of it, I think honestly, so much of it hinges on the election. I think everyone's kind of in this wait and see mode. And I think we're not going to see anything definitive until the election's decided.
Isn't that crazy? We were planning on, we had a couple of clients who wanted to do an event that Wednesday after the election. And I was like, this is going to be either great material or the worst ever. And like, this is going to be a fun road to navigate after this.
I mean, I think it's way too much of, I mean, look, I like high stakes. I like excitement, but like, I'm not trying to mess with money and events, especially knowing as much time and effort it takes to throw a good event. Like, do not let external factors derail you. And you know that Wednesday after is going to be a disaster, no matter what. Like, no matter what.
Navigate that. And I think, but here's the interesting thing too. I also think it gives you a good opportunity not to have a politics conversation with your donors, but to make sure that you explain that your organization is steady Eddie the entire way anyway. Regardless of what happens, you guys still have a mission. You still have people who are going to be in need. You still have things that are not going to immediately change, regardless of whatever an outcome is going to be. And that this, regardless of the clown show that's going to be, Tuesday, Wednesday, is your mission is still there and it's important. And that conversation is going to have to be had with a ton of people, new people and old people alike, right?
I think that that's right, but I also think that we have to recognize that our donors are human beings, and like we're all just sort of kerfuffled right now. I mean, again, we're in New York City, right? So it's another level of just like intensity ratcheting up. I mean, look, I think everyone is overwhelmed this year between like homeschooling your children. I mean, I don't know if you just saw New York City just announced that they weren't going to be in session like 3 days before they were supposed to be. It's a complete disaster. I mean, so I just feel like right now people aren't necessarily thinking about their philanthropic priorities as front and center, which is not to say that we shouldn't keep telling the story. Obviously, we need to keep talking about the fact that we, in many cases, are the only link that a lot of the clients have to survival. But I also think like, can we just like give people a minute? Like 2020 has just been a dumpster fire.
Yeah. Well, expand on that too, because you don't necessarily need to talk to your donors about what you do and how is it okay to ask them just how they're doing? Not even
100%.
So I think
100%.
a lot of people, so I think a lot of people get into their mindset, if I got a donor on the line, I got to talk about our mission. Not necessarily. I think a lot of your more intimate conversations about things that are outside of the scale and scope of an organization, just checking in to see how they're doing physically, mentally, whatever. I mean, there's an element there of personalization.
Well, Patrick, let me just tell you, this hits on my pet peeve, which is I hate when people talk about pitching donors. I'm like, a donor is a person. You are a person. Can we just actually have a human, real conversation where we're connecting as human beings? Like, 2020 has been a shitty year all the way around.
Yes.
And I'm just going to reach out to you and see how you're doing as a person. And frankly, if you're treating your donors like walking checkbooks, you're probably not getting very many donations, because you know what? People don't like being treated like walking checkbooks. I don't know. Just a crazy idea here.
You're bananas.
I know. Can we just be human beings together?
For those of you who've been listening to the podcast or following us at all, now you know why I just love having her on. This is just a joy to have that sort of enthusiasm and that passion about the exact same topic we talk about all the time, coming from something that's not nasally sounding like this on the other end of the microphone. It's you. This is exactly what we've been talking about. And I'm so glad you say that too, we've lost an element of being human in this process. And I don't understand that, and I understand your board is probably like beating down the door on you getting a budget. And I understand that your executive director is maybe like, I don't know where anything's going to go. You have to go out and raise money. The only way you're going to do that for the long term is to be empathetic and relatable and just understanding of people's life in general. That's such a key element to this.
I mean, I'll tell you, Patrick, I say this all the time. Like, I have raised millions of dollars, and I have never done that on the back of a pitch deck.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, I have done that walking into a room and being ready to connect with someone and talking about what we do, and if that is connected to something that they're interested in, and talking about building something together, right? And so, like, when people talk about like, oh, I'm like this 20-second like elevator pitch. Look, yes, I think you should be able to talk about your organization in a pithy way, because founders in particular are guilty of going on and on and on. But at the core of it, fundraising and philanthropy is love of humans, right? Literally, that's the root of the word. And fundraising at its best is when you're connecting human to human and you're trying to build something bigger together. Like, that's it. That's what it is. And so when people are like, oh, I hate fundraising, I think it's because they don't know what fundraising is actually, or they've been victim of transactional fundraising, or, you know, as a mentor of mine likes to say, fracking fundraising. Fundraising at its best is like making friends and connecting with people and seeing if you can build something together. Who doesn't love that? I love that.
If you do nothing else in this podcast, go back 2 minutes and re-listen to that over and over and over and over. What Rhea just said, that is exactly what you need to do to motivate yourself to get out of bed every morning and go make friends. Do amazing listening and build relationships. You listen to those 2 minutes over and over again. I think that might be the segment. I'm going to note in my brain that this is the pull quote for the entire episode, is just that. And if you take nothing away, what she just said is exactly right. Brilliant.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You should give notes to my husband to take notes on what I say.
Well, I'm going to send him that note as well.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you know what's so funny too? It's like people who get so anxious about fundraising because I think two things. I think that they fear rejection, and I think that they have a lot of unexamined baggage about money. So let's talk about those two things.
Yes.
Fear of rejection. Okay, look, I get it. No one likes to feel rejected, right? Like, it sucks. I mean, it makes us all feel like we're on the schoolyard asking someone out on a date. But the truth is, they're not rejecting you. Like, if they reject you, that's exactly right for them. They're saying that they are not aligned with the thing that you want to do. It's cool. You know what? We need lots of different people doing lots of different things in the world. The world is getting more and more messed up. If I'm doing education and you're like, my thing is, you know, whatever, dogs, great. The dogs need you too. So I feel like, number one, we can't be so precious about it. It's not personal. It's not personal unless it really is personal, in which case, like, you need some other thing. But that's leaving aside that, like, it's not personal. And so your job is actually to find the people for whom your cause is their thing. And so it's almost like you have to be like a metal detector on the beach, right? Like, not every piece of metal that you find is going to be a coin. It's going to be gold, but you got to keep looking.
Brilliant.
So number one, it's not personal. Number two, let's talk about people's baggage about money. We all have baggage about money. If you're rich or you're poor or whatever, we all have baggage, and it's usually imprinted from our childhood, right? The things that we heard our parents say, the things we saw our parents do, the emotional moments that we had in our lives. where money was concerned. And then we carry it throughout our whole lives. And then we just assume that everyone else has the same baggage about money. And it creates this whole thing. And it's like this whole imagined relationship with money. At the core of it, money is just a piece of paper. Like, why are you imbuing all of this stuff into this piece of paper? And it's all resources. And I feel like so many people put up their own blockages and psychoses about money that it doesn't flow. And it has nothing to do with the ask. It has to do with the internal blockage that you're putting up about money.
Again, this whole, we're not even into the meat and potatoes of the podcast, and already there's gold and nuggets all over the place. Literally, that metal detector bit, I'm going to totally steal. I will give you credit for it. I'm totally stealing that bit because it's great. A lot of people who are going to, I think a lot of nonprofits are going to get fired up and jazzed up about finding new people to talk with. And I think that's really where you're going to make or break your 2021 is how many prospects do you have in the hopper?
Yes.
How many people are you going to talk to, and what that process is. I love your perspective on prospecting. I love your perspective on prospecting and board relations. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about that for the listening audience, because I think it's a really wonderful roadmap on where you're going to find individuals and what the expectations are for now, not only your leadership, but your board on helping you find that.
Okay, so here's the central issue, and I'm sure this will sound very familiar to you as a consultant. The ED says to me, my board is not raising any money. The board says, how come the ED is not raising any money, right? So like there's this huge gap here between this misunderstanding about who's supposed to be raising money, right? And so I'm big into analogies. I often think about, like seals at SeaWorld who like are just waiting for someone to throw a fish into their mouth, right? And look, your board should absolutely be responsible for fundraising, but not solely responsible for fundraising, right? Like it should be understood when you recruit them. Oh, that's the other thing I want to say too is often we bring board members on with unclear expectations. So sometimes I'm like, okay, so your board's not fundraising. When you recruited them and brought them on, did you tell them that they were responsible for fundraising? Pause. Well, no. It's like, okay, well, again, clear is kind. Like, how are you, Patrick, you and I are both married. We know that mind reading, though obviously I'm excellent at it, is not very helpful when it comes to managing relationships, right? Like you need to be explicit about the thing that you want. So like that's thing number one. Thing number two, though, is engaging board members in the way that they want to be engaged. So I think often we think about like, oh, it's just about the ask. Well, there's like a whole other cycle here. There's identification, there's cultivation, the solicitation, and the stewardship. And I know we're going to talk about donor retention in a second, which is my other bugaboo. But I think board members should be a source of introductions, but it cannot be your only source of introductions. And so I think we as executives have to think really strategically about the different prospect sources. So it could look like looking at your volunteer base. It could look like your event donors. It could look like, you're out there networking. Well, less so now, but you're out networking. It could look like looking at your client base. Perhaps there are clients who you serve who may themselves not be donors, but may be connected to donors. Obviously, look at your current donor base. So there's just this world of opportunity that I feel like we under leverage, and then we're complaining because like this constant supply of new fish isn't getting thrown in our faces.
Yeah, I think a lot of the volunteer one's brilliant because I think you don't need to sell your organization to volunteers. They already bought in. So now you got to do is figure out their affinity, and if it's a high off the chart, think about how much capacity they have. They have capacity, they're going to give, because you don't need to spend an inordinate amount of time selling them on your organization. They're already doing it. They're volunteering. They love you more than you probably love your organization on a regular basis. They keep coming back. The other thing interesting you said is that your conversations with your board members shouldn't only be about, hey, what donors can you bring? It's interesting that executive directors and fundraisers don't cultivate relationships with their board members the way that they cultivate for their other regular donors. They're people too. They also have loves and likes. And if you don't understand where your board members are coming from or their perspectives, and you're not taking the time to listen to your board members on where they have their passions and where they have their what fingers they have and what circles, how are you supposed to know that you can help them navigate their own Rolodex, even though they don't know where in the Rolodex that they could help in the first place? And that listening skill and that building relationships with them is equally as important as you do volunteers and donors.
I mean, your board members are your number one donors, and you're exactly right. People forget that. And it's almost like once they're in the family, you start abusing them. You know what I mean? It's like the cobbler's children have no shoes.
Yes.
But the truth of the matter is your board members are your number one donors. They're the ones that you need to make feel special, because they're going to be the source for unlocking other people, other networks, other resources. And I feel like so often executives are just kind of beat up on their board members. And I'm like, okay, but like, would you treat your top donor like that? And P.S., that is actually one of your top donors.
Right. And same thing goes for your smaller donors who may give on a regular basis, for 3 or 5 years. Don't look at them as that $25 or that $50 donor. Think about what their track record is. They've given to you for 5 straight years. Okay.
Lifetime giving.
Yeah,
Yes.
this is a number that not a lot of people look at when they're trying to find and prospect new donors. Your new donor could be a donor that could give way more. They could be a small donor. Your new major donor could be right there. And so I love the way that you're saying, go back to your lists and look at them and look at the analytics and find trends and take some time to really look and know who's giving to your organization. The keys to the kingdom are right there. They're the ones that have gotten to you the entire time. And they're going to be the ones, because they've given to you for a long time, that can speak to the positive, awesome things that your organization does and find people on your behalf too. But you've probably never asked them that. You've probably never asked them at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because I obviously, I talk to lots of nonprofits. I would say most of them think that they have a prospect problem. And really what they have is let's call it harvesting problem, right?
Yeah. That's
like they really haven't harvested the bounty that they've brought in. They haven't maximized. They haven't really looked at every single segment and thought about how they maximize. And so instead it's just like more and more and more. It almost reminds me of like a hoarder, The hoarder doesn't actually look at the stuff that they have. They just go out to the mall to keep buying more stuff because they actually don't know what they already have. Now, that being said, like, yes, obviously, I think you should have a very robust prospect pipeline. But before you jump into more, look at your house. Can you get your house in order and look at who you actually have before you go out and buy stuff at Walmart? You know what I'm saying?
Your harvest thing is great. Well, mostly because we live in farm country, so this is going to relate very well.
Yeah, well, listen, we're in New York City, so I don't even know. My farm analogy is maybe totally off. I have no idea how to farm.
It's going to play well here. This is going to be great.
Excellent.
One of the things that is it's so true. We have an apple tree in our backyard, and it's an apple tree next to the kids' trampoline. So the low hanging fruit, it hasn't ripened yet, and they are taking apples off the tree. They're eating them. They're like, oh God, this is so bitter, and I don't like any of those kind of things. They forget to look up at the top where they can't reach, and everything's turning red and awesome and delicious. And because they're eye level, they aren't looking up. They aren't looking for the long term. They're looking for short gains, and that relationship building is a long play. And because those executive directors or the budgets are so glaringly issues, you're just thinking transaction in small amounts rather than saying, okay, if I let it go for a bit, or I marinate that relationship a little bit longer, or I ask better questions, or look at the data a little bit more, all of a sudden my eyes kind of glance up and I'm seeing better looking fruit. That if I just wait a little bit, this thing is going to be amazing. And I think that's just a wonderful analogy on that patience game that not a lot of development directors have or fundraisers have, because they're so worried about when am I going to get money so I can keep the lights on to keep the programming going in the first place.
Yeah, and I think that's
a money issue.
Well, I think that's a real like scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
And I think like, I think we all play into it, right? Because we're all so on this treadmill of like, we got to like keep the lights on, but we don't think about the long term. Like, this is the thing that we're going to put in play and will bear fruit in 3 years. And I think that's a really hard thing. And I think that's where boards really could step in, because the boards are able to stop gaps in short term for the long-term strategy. And then, let me just say something about donors. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast? Like,
we've only had one explicit one, and we've already gone into the to the word shit earlier in there, so we're good.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. No. So
on this thing, it's gonna be great.
Okay. So I was thinking about this last night. I was like, you know what? If there's no other takeaway, then it should be this: you need to love the shit out of your donors. Like, just love them, because at the end of the day, we all want to feel special. We all want to feel like our lives have meant something. We all want to be part of something. Like, that's just the human condition. And so how can you make people feel special and loved because they believed in your organization? And I feel like we come from the scarcity mindset of all of the stuff that we don't have. Look at all of the things we do have. We have all these people who are giving money, who believe in what we do, who care about the things we care about, and are invested in our future. And like, let's focus on that.
One of the things that frustrates me is that organizations refuse to celebrate some of the wins, even though they might be small and tiny, and they forget why they got into this work in the first place, or they forgot how amazing of an organization they work for because they're so concentrating on other things than this is amazing work. We're doing amazing things. We've celebrated that. We need to make sure that we're telling people about how awesome we are. And that includes saying that we love you to donors. I think of the title of the podcast is "Love the Shit Out of Your Donors." Like, I've already written
love
that.
This shit out of your donors.
Congratulations on that one too. But I think that's such a great point. The other thing, and I think this is such a wonderful transition piece too, is I'm sort of the belief that a donor isn't a donor until the second gift. And I think a lot of individual development directors stop thinking about things once a gift comes in. They might write a thank you note, but I love your perspective on making sure that this is just the beginning. When you get a gift, this is the start. Your heavy lifting to get a gift is just beginning now. And I'd love to kind of have that flushed out a little bit for the listeners is, what do you mean? We already got the gift. We won, didn't we?
Yeah. So again, I like analogies. I love dating analogies, even though it's been a while since I've dated. But to me, getting the gift, the first gift, is like going on the first date, right? But that is the beginning of a relationship. You still need to honeymoon them, right? If you want them to commit for the long term, like, wowing them on a first date and then never calling them again is probably not going to do it. And so I think we really need to think about the donor experience. There's a restaurateur here in New York called Danny Meyer, who runs Shake Shack, but he's known to be this like great hospitality guy. And he wrote this book, and he talks about, imagine that everyone in the world is walking around with an imaginary sign around their neck that says, "Make me feel special." Like, make me feel special, right? And so I often think that, like, we're so short-term focused that we think getting the gift is the end. That's really just the beginning. That is like the indication that someone has said, like, I'm raising my hand and I'm interested. But that first gift is, in my mind, should be the first of many gifts. Now, I get it. Like, it's very hard and time consuming to really steward a gift properly, which also speaks to the fact that most development offices are understaffed. This is a perfect way to engage your board. Like, how amazing would it be to have your board engage in fundraising? Like, you don't have to ask for any money. All you have to do is love the shit out of all these people who have given us a gift, because they are now in the family. Like, we're gonna love them. We're gonna make them feel part of something. We're gonna tell them about all of the stuff that their gift has made possible, and then we're gonna enroll them into additional support. That's it.
Wouldn't it be great if your best practice in the board meetings was at the end of every board meetings, taking out 5 thank you notes and having every board member write out 5 thank you notes to a gift that they don't know the amount, they just know the name, and they just know where it's going to be sent. I, as a board member, I don't know how much you gave, and frankly, it doesn't matter. What you did was amazing. You helped us, do these programs. And as a board member, I just wanted to reach out and say thanks at the end of every board meeting. Wouldn't that be a
I think
best practice?
That's awesome. Yes, everyone should do that. Listen to Patrick. I mean, so I'm thinking of two things. Like number one, and this is a mantra I've been repeating for the last couple of weeks, is you are where your attention is, right? And so if your attention is on lack, if your attention is on all of the aggravations, if your attention is on like, how come people aren't giving me money? Then it's just going to grow that emotion, right? I always think about, BDE, big donor energy for those people out there. You got to bring your BDE, right? You got to bring that like positive, gracious, generous energy, and that will beget the same in your donors. Like if you're bringing energy like you're cranky and you're like pissed off about like how come these people aren't donating, like guess what? No one's trying to be around that energy, right? It's again, let's go back to the dating analogy. You know how like when you were single and you couldn't get a date to save your life, and then you're in a relationship and all of a sudden everyone wants your number? Same thing. You have to change your own energy about it. Like you got to bring that BDE.
This is not, God, there's so many quotes in this podcast. I have no idea where to start. This is just amazing. And one of the things is it's not, you're not denying the reality of this being hard. And you're not denying the reality that, hey, we're going to be, it's a challenging year for our organization. You're not denying that. You're not hiding it, whatever. But you're projecting what people want to be associated with. No one wants to be associated with the Debbie Downer that just like, nobody wants to do that. They want the high energy, high enthusiastic, super passionate person that understands the reality, is very self-aware, but knows damn well that they're going to put out the positive vibe of your organization is a solution. And you can't do that by saying, I guess we're okay, only if we have more money. Like that, nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be on the losing team. Everybody wants to be on the up and coming team. Everybody wants to be on the winners. And so position yourself like that. That's very much a mindset issue as well. 100%.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I forget the exact percentages, but there was some communications expert that did a study of how people understand the communication of other people. Very little of it is actually what you say. It's actually your tone of voice and your body language. And so if you're going in to ask and you're like, meh, 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 like you're probably not going to be super successful. To your point, people want hope. And especially now in 2020, we want hope. We want optimism. We want to be belonging to something. We want to affiliate. We want transcendence. We want something that aligns with our values. We want to have conversations about what it is we value. We want to talk about legacy. Like we want to talk about all these good and positive things that I don't think that we have, that we make the space for in our everyday lives. And guess what? In the nonprofit world, we peddle in this. Like this is what we do. We talk about significance. We talk about connecting your heart to something. We talk about changing the world. It's an amazing thing that we get to do in this world. So why would you deny the opportunity to someone else to engage in this higher level of generative thinking and being engaged in the world in a positive way?
You want to make yourself feel better about working at an organization. Have an amazing conversation with an amazing donor that may not result in an amazing sized gift, but they give you something or a piece of advice, or they tell you something great. That then goes into the next meeting. Like, I had that wonderful meeting. I'm gonna have another wonderful meeting. And you're gonna vibe off of that. And I think that's what's going to sustain you through whatever pandemic hits, whatever sort of issues hit, is that connection. Going back to what you said originally, which is building a relationship with a donor and having that intimate connection more so than a transactional. How much money do you have in your checking account? How much money do you have? How much money are you going to go tonight? That doesn't matter. That'll come if they have the affinity for you and they make a really wonderful connection with you. I think that's just such a brilliant way of thinking about it, because it's going to set you up for success too.
Well, I also think we should think about the words that we use. Actually, so again, one of my mentors talks about, she doesn't use the word donor, she uses the word partner. And I think that changes the whole power dynamic, right? So it's not a donor, it's a philanthropic partner who's going to be on a journey with you, or not, right? Like, not everyone's going to be your partner, and like, that's okay too. And then she also says, never use the word help, because I think help creates that power differential. You ask people to take responsibility for.
Right. Oh, that's
Would you
great.
like to take responsibility for this thing that you said that was important to you?
That's another thing with the words that instead of using the word charity, It's not probably
Yeah.
you're not willing to use charity. You're not a handout. You're a solution to an issue that the government can't, wouldn't, or shouldn't do. And
Mm-hmm.
and that, I think, is an actionable item that you can use in a positive spin, that people go, oh, well, I'm the part of the solution. I'm part of the I'm not helping, I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, I think it goes back to mindset, because I feel like so many executive directors, themselves may not be coming from a place of abundance or a place of, worthiness. And, you can't be what you can't see, right? So like, if you're not coming from a place of, I have something of value to offer to you, and together we might build something together.
Mhm.
I said together twice, but you see my point.
Yeah.
Of course you're going to be burnt out. Like, no one likes to feel downtrodden.
No.
But I think we have to start thinking about resources in a more expansive way. Like, the resources that a nonprofit might bring is expertise, is manpower, is connections to community, and the resources that your partners bring is money. And together you can build something even bigger.
It's funny because
And
that list that you just said, the last thing you said was money. The rest was way more important and personalized to it, impact, and I'm going to make community, and I'm like that. That's what gets people like leaning forward and leaning in. And yeah, money is a thing. We can't do it without cash, but you're with the cash, you get to do all those other things.
That's right. That's right. Money is not the center of the relationship. And I think that's where a lot of nonprofit folks and development directors make the mistake. When you make the relationship about money, of course, it's always going to feel shitty, right? You're always going to be on the losing end of that game. But if you make the relationship about the stuff that we can do together, and it's almost like stone soup. Like, I'm going to bring the potatoes and you bring the carrots, and we're going to make this delicious soup together that's going to feed everybody. Then it becomes much more about partnership, and it becomes much more about what can we do together versus like this, client patron relationship where I'm on my knees, like kissing the ring.
I love it so much. I am so grateful for this conversation today. I know it's that we're recording this at the end of the week, but what a wonderful thing to go out in style with. I mean, I'm all pumped up and I want to talk about this for the rest of the day. And by the way, we could talk about this for 15 hours. Like, honest to God, this is not long enough of a podcast form for us. And so, but if they want to know more and they want more Rhea Wong.
They want more Rhea Wong.
Yeah, they want more you. How on earth do people get a hold of you? How can they get inspired and listen to what you say and connect with you through other avenues, whether website or podcast or whatever? Go, floor is yours. How do we get a hold of you?
So check out my website, which I'm having some issues with, but should be back up, rheawong.com, rheawong.com. Funny enough, there aren't that many Rhea Wongs in this world, so lucky for me. Yeah.
Great.
I think one night I may have been out late drinking and like Facebook friended all the Rhea Wongs I could find on Facebook. And the next morning I was like, who are all these Rhea Wongs? Not that many of them. Really. So there's that. And then my podcast, Nonprofit Lowdown, folks should check out. So we talk about all of the nonprofit things, all of the business, all of the time.
Oh, it's a wonderful podcast. You'll find it on lists of like favorite podcasts from a lot of folks as well. So,
which is like so surprising because I don't put them on those lists. And it's like I'm so touched when that happens. I'm like, how did you know? Because I just assumed my mom was listening to my podcast like 200 times.
It might be me liking it and then just like repeat. And it's totally fine. You deserve all the kudos for this. This has been wonderful. This is why I just enjoy having you as in my life, in my conversations all the time. And I'm so glad you could be a guest on the official Do Good Better podcast. We'll put all the links in the show notes as well. And please go visit rheawong.com. Go find Nonprofit Lowdown. Go listen to her talk about amazing things. She's brilliant, and so lucky to have you on today. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Patrick.
A guest, and it just again value today on this episode. It's just wonderful, and you've inspired me today. Whatever I'm going to do it exponentially.
Oh, good. Well, Patrick, right back at you. I really appreciate everything that you're doing. Thanks for having me. Your energy is infectious. I mean, we have so much fun when we're together.
So great.
Let's go raise some money.
Let's go do it. You got this. All right. Thanks for listening to the official
All right.
Do Good Better podcast.